I woke up before the alarm. For the past few months, I'd been unable to sleep through the night. I would just lie there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the next room and to Claire's breathing beside me, her back turned. Her breathing was always steady, but distant, as if there were a thin, impenetrable wall between us. She never said she was tired of me, but I could feel it in every pause, every glance that passed right through me. I got up quietly, trying not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. Mornings in our house smelled of coffee and tension. Claire would sit across from me, barely looking up, scrolling through the news on her phone. We exchanged the usual small talk about the weather and work, two strangers who happened to share the same table. That morning, all I could think about was how to get through another identical Monday. That's when the phone rang. At first, I thought it was a client. Accounting rarely left me alone, even at home. But the voice on the other end was too calm, too formal. The man introduced himself as a lawyer. He spoke evenly, with a slight Southern accent, and told me that I was the legal heir to a property in South Carolina. I thought I had misheard. "No, Mr. Bennett," he said, "that's correct. Your late grandfather, Mr. John Bennett, left you an estate, an old house in Colleton County. I believe you should come down and review the documents." I was silent for a long moment, unsure what to say. I barely remembered my grandfather. I'd seen him maybe twice as a child. He had always seemed stern and strange, and then one day he just disappeared from our lives. My mother never liked to talk about him. When I hung up, Claire was already standing in the kitchen doorway, holding her mug. "Who was that?" she asked. I told her. She listened without interrupting, then smirked. "An inheritance? An old house? Do you really think anything good could come of that?" I shrugged. "I don't know, but maybe I should go see it. It's still family." Claire snorted. "You hate traveling, and you don't have time. We just started paying off the car loan, and now you want to fly off to look at some wreck that's probably ready to collapse?" I felt irritation rising, but I held it in. "It's not about the money, Claire. It's just strange. Why me?" She set down her mug and said, without looking at me, "Because you're always looking for a reason to run away." Those words hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer. She walked back to the bedroom, leaving behind the smell of coffee and cold distance. I couldn't concentrate on work all day. My mind kept circling back to the phone call, the lawyer's calm voice, the way he said, "your inheritance." That evening, when I came home, Claire was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. The TV was on mute. I sat down beside her, not sure how to start. "I've been thinking," I said, "maybe I'll go there alone, just for a few days, sort out the paperwork." She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, "Do what you want. Just don't expect me to be waiting with open arms when you get back." I nodded. We didn't speak again. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Images flickered in my head. An old house covered in moss, dusty rooms, the smell of wood and damp air. Something about it pulled at me, as if some part of me already knew there was more to it than just an inheritance. At dawn, I got up and packed a suitcase. Claire was asleep, turned toward the wall. I looked at her and realized it might be the last time I'd see her like that, calm, distant, unreachable. I stepped out of the house, the morning air heavy with salt and gasoline. Inside, I felt something shift, as if I'd already crossed a line between the past and the unknown. I didn't know then that that phone call would change everything. I arrived at the house by evening. The sun was already sinking, painting the crooked shutters and peeling paint in strange orange-brown hues. The house looked frozen in time, and the longer I stared, the stronger the feeling grew that no one had been there for decades. I stopped the car, hesitating to get out. My heart was beating faster than usual, though the street was quiet. The wind rustled through the old trees, and for a moment the sound almost resembled footsteps. I closed the car door and walked slowly to the porch. The boards creaked underfoot, as if warning of every movement. The front door resisted,
then opened with effort, releasing a thick wave of dust and musty air. Inside, everything was coated in time. Cobwebs on the chandelier, yellowed wallpaper peeling from the walls, furniture draped in old sheets. I took a step, and the air seemed to grow colder, almost tangible. "Hello, Grandpa," I said, though it felt strange. I could barely remember him. In the kitchen, I found an old notebook filled with neat dates and numbers written in my grandfather's hand, familiar yet foreign. Each page was carefully folded, but the edges were coated with a strange residue, as if they'd been stored in a damp basement for decades. I flipped through the entries. Most of the figures and notes made no sense. Why had no one mentioned this part of his life? If Claire were here, she'd probably roll her eyes and say something like, "So this is how you plan to spend your time?" I sat on a step, staring at the old cellar door in the corner of the kitchen. It was almost hidden under a warped rug. I pulled at the heavy iron handle, and the hatch opened with a loud creak. The darkness below was thick, like a heavy fabric that swallowed light. I turned on my flashlight. Dust swirled in the beam, and I saw wooden crates, old suitcases, and piles of paper. I carefully opened one of the crates. Inside were neatly stacked folders, their labels almost erased by time. I took one out and started flipping through it. The documents looked official: contracts, bank statements, wills, letters with markings and seals. I felt something tighten in my chest. These papers clearly had nothing to do with an ordinary inheritance. I read a few lines. The numbers written there were enormous, far beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. "This is impossible," I whispered, my hands trembling. Just then, I heard footsteps outside the house. I froze, listening. The steps stopped as suddenly as they began. My grip tightened on the folder, and a cold sweat broke out on my back. "Who's there?" I called out, though no one answered. Only the faint creak of a window shutter replied. I told myself it was just the wind, but the tension inside me didn't fade. I looked back at the documents and noticed my grandfather's signature beside strange, hurried notes. Some papers were co-signed by unknown people, partners perhaps, in whatever dealings he had kept secret. This wasn't just an old house, and these weren't just old papers. There was something bigger behind all of it. I pulled out my phone and called Claire. She picked up after a few rings. "Michael, are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight, almost suspicious. I'm at my grandfather's house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found some documents. It's strange, Claire. He was keeping something important here." She was silent for a moment, then said coldly, "Don't touch anything you don't understand. Just come back." "But Claire, listen. This might be bigger than we think. I have to look into it." She sighed heavily. "You know this is a bad idea." I hung up and looked back toward the cellar. The silence felt heavier now, almost dangerous. I realized I had stepped into something where my grandfather's past intertwined with something much larger and unpredictable. Night was falling faster than I expected, and every shadow in the basement seemed alive. I spread out the folders, noticing a few marked with a strange symbol I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened again. I knew one thing: the old house held a secret that could change everything.
I was sitting on the basement floor, surrounded by folders and old papers, when I heard the creak of the stairs above me. My heart tightened, and I froze, listening. The footsteps drew closer until someone quietly said, "Michael Bennett?" I jumped to my feet and turned around, but in the darkness I could barely make out anything. "Who's there?" My voice trembled, though I tried to hide the fear. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall, wearing a dark jacket, his face barely visible. "No need to panic," he said calmly, though his tone carried a quiet threat. "I know what you found." "Found what?" I asked, trying to stay composed. "Who are you?" He stepped closer and smiled, but it was a cold, joyless smile. "Let's not play games. Your grandfather's house isn't just old junk. And you've already taken more than what belongs to you." A chill ran down my spine. "I didn't take anything. I was just going through the documents," I protested. "The documents say otherwise," he replied, nodding toward the folders. "You need to understand what you're dealing with." Fear and anger surged inside me. "I don't understand what you're—" I started, but he cut me off. "Your grandfather left behind something valuable. Money, influence, connections, and you have no idea what kind of storm you're about to unleash." His words hit harder than a physical blow. A thought flashed through my mind. Maybe these millions weren't just numbers on paper. Maybe they were something that could kill. "Why are you here?" I asked, trying to sound firm, though my insides trembled. He smirked. "I'm here to make sure you don't ruin things, and to remind you, not every heir is as innocent as he seems." I froze. His words hung in the air like heavy lead. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Someone who's been watching this family for a long time. Your grandfather never did anything without reason, and what you found might be far more dangerous than you think." He paused, his eyes locking on mine. "You do realize that even Claire might be part of this story?" he said softly, almost whispering. My blood turned cold. How could that be? Claire? No, she couldn't be involved. But the seed of doubt took root. I don't understand," I stammered, searching for logic. He leaned closer. "Until you know the full truth, don't touch those papers, or the consequences will be unpredictable." He turned toward the stairs. I tried to stop him. "Wait, how can I trust you?" He looked back over his shoulder. "You trust yourself, Michael. The rest? That's a choice you'll have to make." And he was gone, leaving me alone in the dark basement. I sat on the cold floor, surrounded by folders, and a silence that now felt dangerous, almost suffocating. My heart pounded and my mind raced. Who was that man? What did he want? And what was I supposed to do with my grandfather's papers now? One thing was clear. Everything I'd thought about the old house, the inheritance, the safety, was an illusion. My grandfather's secret was waking up, and I was standing on the edge of something that could spiral out of control. Then my phone vibrated, a missed call from Claire. I hesitated before calling back. When she answered, her voice was tight, almost frightened. "Michael, are you alone? Do you understand now?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. It's not what it seems." She fell silent, and through the quiet, I heard the wind brushing against the windows, as if warning me that the danger was only growing stronger. I sank back to the floor, staring at the documents, knowing that the night ahead would be long, and that my grandfather's house held far more than just papers. Who was that man? What did he want? And could I uncover the truth before it was too late? I stood before the old safe in the corner of the basement, my fingers trembling as they brushed across its lock. It was massive, iron, its edges worn and rusted, as if it hadn't been opened in decades. In my grandfather's notebook, I'd found an instruction, a sequence of numbers that, according to him, would open not just a door, but a part of the past. I took a deep breath, entered the code, and heard a soft click. The door creaked open, and I stepped back to look inside. There were neatly stacked folders and several envelopes, all marked with my grandfather's name. I lifted one folder carefully and flipped through the documents, and my blood ran cold. Bank accounts, wills, contracts, the numbers were staggering. $74 million. $74 million! It was more real than any dream of wealth, and far more terrifying. I barely had time to process it when I heard the sharp groan of the basement stairs. My heart lurched. "Don't think you're alone," said a familiar voice.
The stranger stood in the doorway, his eyes cold, void of warmth or humor. "You found what you were looking for," he said. "But now you need to understand. These papers are worth more than life itself." "What do you mean?" I asked, clutching the folder tighter. "Your grandfather was smarter than you think. This isn't just money. The people who knew about it paid with their lives to keep it secret." A chill spread across my skin. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," I whispered. "The harm's already done, Michael," he said, stepping closer. "And you're on the verge of becoming part of it." I glanced down at the papers. The sum was immense, but I understood now. This wasn't inheritance. It was a trap. The stranger shifted slightly, watching me. "You have a choice. Leave it here and walk away, or take it and accept that no one will be able to save you." A tremor of fear coursed through me, but something inside hardened, fear mixed with resolve. "I'll take it," I said. A thin smile crossed his face. "I thought so. Then be ready." At that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Claire stepped into the house. "Michael, I came," she said, but her expression was unreadable, a mix of worry, determination, and something else I couldn't name. I noticed her hand tightening around the bag she carried, the one with the documents. For a second, everything froze. The stranger looked at her and murmured, "She knew?" Claire stayed silent, but a shadow flickered in her eyes. "Now you understand this isn't a game," he said, stepping back. "And every choice you make will cost you dearly." I held the documents that could change everything, and felt the weight of them pressing down on my shoulders like lead. Claire moved closer, her gaze locking with mine. "Michael, we have to do this together," she said, and I knew our strength together might be the only thing keeping us alive. The stranger walked out of the basement, leaving us alone with the endless papers, the ghosts of the past, and a future hanging by a thread. I sat down on the floor, flipping through the documents, trying to understand what secrets my grandfather still hid, what dangers we hadn't yet seen, and how these $74 million could either destroy or save everything I knew about life and love. Night fell over the house, but it wasn't just darkness anymore. It was a promise of revelations, trials, and choices that would change everything. I looked at Claire and whispered, "We have to be careful. This is only the beginning."
I was sitting on the basement floor, flipping through the documents and trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few hours. My heart was slowly beginning to calm down, but the tension hadn't left completely. Claire stood nearby, her eyes tense but filled with determination. "Michael, we have to be careful," she said quietly, almost in a whisper. I nodded. "I know, but we can't just leave it here. The stranger will come back, and next time he might be even more dangerous." She stepped closer and placed her hand on my shoulder. "Then we act together, but carefully." We began to plan. "I'll divide the documents," I suggested. "We'll keep part of them here in the house, where it's safe, and move the rest to a bank vault. That way, no one will be able to use them against us." Claire nodded, and we carefully started sorting the folders. Each paper carried the weight of my grandfather's history, his secrets and warnings. "Do you think he knew someone would come?" she asked. I thought for a moment. Of course, grandfather never left anything to chance. Every number, every signature, it's all a test. We were almost finished when footsteps echoed upstairs. The stranger had returned. My heart leapt again, but this time I was ready. "So, you're back," I said calmly, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. He smirked. "Seems like you've found yourself an ally," he said, glancing at Claire. I felt the tension rise, but Claire took a step forward and said firmly, "We're together, and you can't scare us anymore." The stranger went silent for a moment, assessing us. "You're clever, but still naive," he said. then made a small gesture with his hand. "I'm leaving today, but remember, this isn't over." He walked out, leaving behind only the soft creak of the door. We exhaled in relief, but deep down we both knew the threat hadn't disappeared completely. I looked at the documents, now divided and partly hidden in safe places. "We made the right choice," I said. "What matters now is staying in control, not giving in to fear." Claire smiled through her exhaustion. "You're right, and I'm proud of you." In that moment, for the first time, I felt that we were acting as a team. We had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and we had made it through together. We set up a system, part of the documents hidden in the house where only we could find them, and part secured in a bank vault under both our names. The money, the papers, and my grandfather's secrets were safe, but their weight still lingered, like a heavy legacy of the past. "Michael, we have to remember that money isn't the most important thing," Claire said softly. "What matters is that we're together." I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. That night had shown us that true wealth was trust, family, and the courage to make hard choices. We spent several hours making sure everything was in order and that the stranger couldn't use our inexperience against us. Silence finally settled over the old house, but now it was different. It no longer felt like a threat. It was a kind of protection, a calm after the storm. I looked at Claire, and we exchanged a look of understanding that needed no words. "Now we're ready," I said, and for the first time in a long while, I felt inner peace. The old house, the grandfather's documents, and the $74 million no longer felt like danger. They were a trial we had overcome together. In that moment, I realized that no amount of wealth means anything without someone you can trust, someone who stands beside you and shares the responsibility. We turned off the basement light, closed the door, and went upstairs. The night was slowly fading, leaving behind a feeling of victory, cautious, conscious, and wise. We knew more challenges lay ahead, but now we could face them together, stronger than ever. We sat on the porch of the old house, listening to the wind rustling through the ancient trees, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a peace that seemed almost foreign. Claire held my hand, her gaze soft yet steady. "Michael, you know, I thought all of this would destroy us," she said quietly. I smiled, gently squeezing her fingers. "We went through it together, and now I understand. Nothing can destroy what's built on trust." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaking floors, the soft noises outside that once seemed frightening. Now they felt like part of the story, part of our journey. I remembered all those hours of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, the encounters with the stranger, the moments when we barely held on. And suddenly I realized that the most important thing wasn't the inheritance, or the money, or my grandfather's secrets. "Michael, the money?" Claire asked with a faint smile. I looked at the documents, neatly stacked and safely hidden, and said calmly, "It's all here, but we'll use it wisely. What matters most is that we're together. Everything else is secondary." She nodded. "Yes, we've learned what truly matters." At that moment, I felt the heavy burden of the past days slowly lift from my shoulders. All the fears, threats, and uncertainty, they were behind us now, and ahead lay a new life. We spent hours discussing how to use the inheritance, some for security, some for our future plans, but every decision made carefully, deliberately. "We made the right choice," I said, looking at Claire. "Now we can build our future." She embraced me, and I felt the warmth of her hand, confidence, support, love. We talked about keeping the house without putting ourselves at risk, about protecting the documents and money so no one could ever use them against us. "This house was a test," Claire said, "and we passed it." I agreed, realizing the truth in her words. The house, the documents, the millions, they were just the backdrop for the real story, one about trust, endurance, and love. The evening settled slowly, painting the house's facade in shades of gold and crimson. I looked at the old windows, the peeling shutters, the creaking doors, and understood that they no longer symbolized fear. They were witnesses to the path we'd taken, to the lessons learned, and to our unity. Michael, what's next? I took a deep breath. Next comes life, our life, and we face it together with a clear mind and an open heart. We stood up, closed the doors of the house, turned off the basement light, and stepped out onto the porch, feeling the cool evening air. At that moment, I realized that the true value of the inheritance wasn't in the money. It was in the trust we'd built, the strength we'd found, and the understanding we'd earned. I looked at Claire and said quietly, "We made it." She smiled, squeezing my hand, and I felt every fear and doubt dissolve in that moment. The old house was no longer just wood and brick. It had become a symbol of endurance, of trials faced and overcome, of victory over our inner fears. We took a step forward, leaving the past behind, but carrying with us the lessons that had changed us forever. And in the silence of the evening, I finally allowed myself to feel complete peace, knowing that now we were a team, a family, and ahead of us lay a new path, one we would walk together, stronger and wiser than ever.